People talk about law schools trying to game the rankings, but I think the actual villain is the rankings formula itself, the one that every admissions office really has no choice but to serve. The current law school rankings are designed in a way that you might not expect. The LSAT and the GPA actually aren't the largest components of the rankings. The biggest parts are employment and bar passage rates. Employment is 33%, first time bar passage rate is 18%, ultimate bar passage is another 7%. And so together, the employment and bar passage is 58% of a law school's rank, which is based on the outcomes. That is a real improvement over the old formula, which gave too much importance to reputation. But LSAT and GPA still indirectly are predictive of the outcomes. And so in a way, the LSAT and GPA still have not diminished in importance. And the employment and bar numbers in the current rankings come from graduating classes that entered law school a couple of years ago. And so it is really a lagging indicator. The inputs are more predictive of where the law schools will end up over time. Then you've got peer assessment from academics, you've got lawyers and judges, and so reputation moves slowly. It's by design almost, and that's why the top of the list looks the same year after year, and why a school that genuinely improved in 2023 is still climbing 1 or 2 spots a year in 2026. Now, a prestigious school can decline for years before the ranking shows it because reputation is from memory. It's circular in a way because the indications of reputation that judges and lawyers have are from the rankings of the past. So employers in your target city where you might want to work, they already have opinions about local schools that no ranking is going to update. So you can actually go out now and find out what those opinions are before you decide that the difference between a school ranked 34 and one ranked 41 actually matters at all. And selectivity is about 10% of the ranking. Your LSAT score is another 5%. Median GPA is another 4%. And so the number every applicant obsesses over and every school protects is worth a small percentage of the ranking it supposedly drives. And your end LSAT score is the most, that 5% is the most valuable 5% in the whole document for you in particular, because schools protect medians much more than their weight would explain, and they pay real money to do it. Nationally, the median institutional grant to a full-time student was nearly $24,000 last year, and the biggest awards go to files that sit above a school's 75th percentile. And so while the rankings only give the LSAT 5%, the financial aid office counts it as something closer to 100% because that input drives the outputs later. And there's a reason the weight understates the behavior. A median is a cliff. One applicant can move a school's reported median by a full point, and that point gets quoted in every comparison for the next 12 months. And so schools don't buy scores because 5% is a lot. They buy scores because the 5% is discontinuous. The applicant who lands on the right side of the cliff is worth more to them than the 10 who land just below it. Now, from their side, acceptance rate is just 1% of the ranking, which makes that whole selectivity theater almost worthless. A school could drop its acceptance rate by 10 points and barely register it in the formula. Now, the waitlist still gets used aggressively, not for the reason people typically assume. The long waitlist is not really about the acceptance rate. It's about managing class size, managing their medians, managing their yield. And so a school holds you in July because they are protecting their numbers and they want to fill their seats without breaking one of those numbers. That means a waitlist is a live position. It can change at any time. There are students who get accepted off the waitlist in August every single year. They're moving across the country and desperately scrambling to find an apartment with classes starting in a couple days in many cases. That also means that if you stay in touch with the school, you send letters of continued interest, and you have a strong LSAT score, you're going to get pulled off the waitlist when the deposit from someone else falls through last minute. Now, employment rates, bar passage rates are averaged across 2 graduating classes. That is the current methodology. They use a 2-year unweighted average of the 2023 and 2024 classes for those indicators, which can smooth out the year-to-year swings that used to whipsaw smaller schools. Now, a school whose outcomes fell off a cliff last year gets half of that averaged away this cycle, and you won't see the full drop in the rank until you're already a 2L. But you can see it now. The underlying ABA employment summary for a single class is public right now at the ABA required disclosures website, and it's not averaged with anything. Now, employed has a technical definition, and schools adhere to it. They manage their outcomes around it. The indicator rewards full-time, long-term jobs that require bar passage or where the JD is an advantage. School-funded positions are reported separately, and there are categories for part-time, short-term, and status unknown. And every one of these distinctions exists because somebody once counted a 4-month research fellowship as a legal job. So you've got to read the employment summaries, not the ranks. The ranks compress a dozen job categories into a single position on a list. The summary breaks them out. How many went to firms? How many went to the government? How many went to clerkships? How many are unaccounted for? A school ranked 45 with strong, full-time, long-term bar passage required placement in the city you want to work in beats a school ranked at 32 that mostly places graduates hundreds of miles from there. The rankings can't tell you that, but the ABA filings can and will. The employment summary also breaks out placement by state, which is the single most useful chart that nobody ever reads. Law school hiring is regional for everybody below the very top, and a school's national rank tells you nothing about where its graduates end up or whether they live where you want to live. Now, bar passage is now counted across all first-time takers, not just the school's biggest jurisdictions. So that change de-emphasized geography, so a school no longer gets rewarded or punished by the accident of which state most of its graduates sat in. Now, first-time bar passage rates vary a lot between schools that sit near each other on the list. There are 2 schools ranked 5 spots apart that could have first-time bar passage rates far enough apart to matter to your first year of income. So you want to look up the actual number for the schools you're considering and look at ultimate passage next to it. The gap between the two is graduates who needed a second attempt, which is months of studying for the bar instead of earning money as an attorney. Now, the formula does not contain price. It doesn't contain tuition, doesn't contain average debt at graduation or the size of scholarships they offer or how many get clawed back because they were conditional or academic attrition or how much the 1L class grew. It does not include any of that. A school could double its class size, cut their aid, and flunk out more 1Ls without the rankings carry, as long as the graduates it does produce get hired and pass the bar. So I want you to sit with that for a second because it has a not so nice implication. If they dismiss students who are likely to struggle in the bar exam, that's going to improve 2 of the 3 biggest indicators. The rankings, I'm not saying they do that by design. I'm not saying anyone's doing it deliberately, but the formula measures outcomes and ignores attrition. So it has a big hole that has that consequence. And the only way that you can determine that hole is by looking at the attrition table in the school's ABA filing. And so the question is, of course, what do you do with all this? The rankings aren't fake. The outcomes emphasis on employment and bar passage is 58%. That's real. It's defensible. I think there's a good reason for it. And the reputation side is also reasonable because hiring partners have the same biases that the survey does. So you can't pretend the list doesn't matter. But it's a ranking of schools, and you're not really buying a school. You're buying a price, a JD, a city to live in for a couple of years, an employment market, and the likelihood of passing the bar, the employers that the school feeds into. And a lot of those are not contained within the rankings. And so if you want the best indication of what is missing from the rankings, look at the ABA required disclosures. And of course, the input that you control is your LSAT score. And if you want my help getting the highest LSAT score possible, getting into better schools, getting more scholarship money, I'm happy to help you out. I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. You can book that free tutoring lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG. I've also put together a free LSAT cheat sheet to help you jumpstart your LSAT prep. You can grab that free cheat sheet at unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet. Applications to law school are up 36.4% over the past 2 years based on LSAC's own volume summary. And so a marginal file that used to squeak by now loses the seat outright. But the decision that actually loses you that seat didn't happen this cycle. It happened years ago in a semester you've mostly forgotten when LSAC recalculated every grade from all 4 years of your transcript into a single GPA. And so a transcript that never showed up costs you a month in December and delays your application, and one that doesn't surface until you're already applying to the bar 4 years later. And so I want to help you avoid running into these mistakes, nip them in the bud now. Consider that every grade you've ever received in college is going to go on your application because LSAC recalculates your GPA from every undergraduate institution you've ever had. If your school lets you retake a class and replace the old grade, LSAC doesn't care, both grades count. So it bites you 3 or 4 years later when the number on your LSAC report comes back lower than the number on your school's transcript, and you have no one to explain it to because nobody's asking, they're just reading the lower one. While you're still enrolled in college, you can still take more credits to raise your average GPA. There's the whole mess with dual enrollment grades. For those who aren't aware, LSAC considered changing their policy on this. After getting a lot of criticism, they pushed back the change or rolled it back to apply only next year. And so you want to look at whether your high school grades that you earned that are college credits, whether they're higher or lower than your average, because that might determine whether you want to apply this year or next year if you're interested in marginal improvements to your GPA. At the same time, consider that your LSAT score weighs more heavily than your entire undergraduate GPA. So for all that energy you're devoting to your GPA, consider that your LSAT score weighs more heavily anyway. Now, one withdrawal is invisible. Not a big deal, not worth stressing about if you do withdraw from a class. But a pattern of them, especially clustered in the same semester, could be a story. It could indicate a pattern. Now, most people racking these up are under the belief that they're protecting their transcript, and they are from one angle, because nobody rejects you for a single withdrawal. But a reader who's forming a picture of how you handle a load is going to notice. And that could get you moved from the admit pile to the waitlist pile without ever getting written down, just because it's an indication of something. And so what you want to do if you're in that situation is write a quick addendum, matter of fact, concise. Don't make excuses, just explain straightforwardly what happened and why, and give them reason to be confident that this sort of thing is not going to happen again in law school, of course. Now, every institution you attended has to send a transcript to LSAC. If it was a community college class you took at home after freshman year, 6 credits from a study abroad program, or that dual enrollment from high school, all of that has to go in. And so if you earned classes outside of your undergrad, you want to request those transcripts now if you're applying to law school this fall to avoid any delays. This right now, today, is the time to request them. It's not fun. These registrars are quite bureaucratic, but it could save you an entire cycle. So pull up your academic history, write down every single institution that has ever issued you a grade, including one that you attended even just for 6 weeks. Now, people will choose a test date by asking when they're going to be ready when it comes to the LSAT. But the better question is asking which cycle you want to apply in, then count backwards to leave room for a retake and score release before applications open. If you take the LSAT in September, scores come back at the end of the month, you're still applying early. Same goes for October or November. But if you take it in January or February, you're no longer early, not necessarily late either, but no reason to delay your applications if you can avoid it. Law school admissions is rolling. The order in which you apply determines the order in which your application might get read. And when you apply earlier, it's easier to get in, and there's also more scholarship money available. When you apply later, it's a bit harder to get in, and there's less scholarship money available. And so you don't want to be applying when half of your target schools have already started rendering decisions. And so right now, think about what is your target application month. Go 6 weeks prior to that for score release and processing, then back up another full test administration for the retake you're probably going to want. That is your first real test date. And so speaking today, maybe you take it in September with October LSAT as a backup, or you take the LSAT in October with November as a backup. What you don't want is to take it in February with April as a backup, because at that point you're already way late in this cycle. There's also a logistics component to consider as well, because the LSAT is now in-person only at Prometric testing centers with remote testing only by exception, which means your test date also relates to seat availability at a specific physical building near you. And of course, the popular test centers fill up first. And registration is first come, first served. And so if you sign for the LSAT last minute, you're going to have the worst, least convenient test centers available to you. If you register early, you have the best, most convenient test centers available to you. Now, if you don't know your starting score and you don't know what you're missing and why, you could study for 4 months and still have no idea whether anything is working. And so this bites you when at month 4, you're plateauing, your score has been flat for 6 practice tests, and you have no record to diagnose. That is the point where most people conclude they are just bad at the LSAT, but they're not. The problem is they have no data on themselves. You don't need a whole elaborate tracking spreadsheet, but you got to know what question types you're struggling with, what you picked, what the right answer was, and one sentence on why the wrong answer looked good to you at the time. And that analysis right there is key, because if you track your mistakes, the pattern becomes really obvious. And it's usually just 1 or 2 mistakes repeating over and over. It's not 15 different weaknesses. So what you don't want is to take the LSAT just to see what happens. You want to know within a couple of points what you're likely to score on test day. Your score report shows the scores in your reportable window over the past 5 years. Schools will see the entire history. There's also a cap on how many times that you're allowed to take the LSAT, so you want to know what those limits are. It's 5 times in 5 years, 7 times for life, and if you get a 180, you can't take it again. But there is no reason to wait until test day to see where you stand, because you can take a practice test and understand where you're at for free. Save the real practice test for when you're within a few points of the score you actually want. Now, you should know the format of the LSAT has changed. They removed logic games 2 years ago in August 2024. The LSAT is now 2 scored logical reasoning sections, 1 scored reading comp, plus 1 unscored extra section, meaning logical reasoning is now 2/3 of your test. And all the old books on eBay or the hand-me-downs or the ChatGPT books on Amazon with logic games are describing an exam that no longer exists. If you got hand-me-down study materials from your older sibling or cousin who took it a couple years ago, that could be wasting your time. So before you buy anything, check the copyright date, check the publication date, make sure your materials are up to date. If you're applying this fall, ask for rec letters now. Professors need at least a month lead time typically. Then you need to give LSAC time to process it and attach it to your file. So again, you don't want your application delayed because someone hasn't uploaded a PDF. Even better, if you're applying next cycle, ask in the spring, follow up in the summer, and give the recommender a 1-page summary of what you did in their class, because that will help them write a better letter and they'll also write it faster. And don't go for the federal judge who met you twice or is your parent's friend. Go for the professor who knows you well, you were in their seminar, you went to office hours, you raised your hand in class. They will be able to write a more specific detailed letter that shows something unique to you and helps you stand out. Admissions officers have seen thousands of these letters. The second one, the personal one with details, can actually help your chances. The first one gets ignored. Now, if you're concerned about the cost of law school, LSAC has a fee waiver program where they will give you a free LSAT take or two, plus access to Law Hub for free. And law schools also give their own application fee waivers. All you've got to do is ask. If you're applying to 10, 15 schools, that could save you $1,000 or more. What you don't want is to avoid applying to law school because of the application fee. Because if you apply to more schools, you get more offers, you will have more scholarship negotiation leverage. Now, the application fee waivers from schools, they're pretty generous and easy about those. LSAC is not so easy though. So you want to make sure that you have all your documentation lined up, tax records and such, tax returns, so that you can appeal if you need to. But of course, more documentation means you're more likely to get the fee waiver on your first ask. Personal statements also, you want to start working on those early. You don't want to delay them until after you've taken the LSAT and you're exhausted from the test. The best writing goes through round after round of revision, and it's not done by ChatGPT. That's obvious. They can smell it a mile away. Remember, they're reading thousands of these application essays. Write it yourself, write it well, have friends and family check it over. Ideally, have someone with admissions experience looking at it for you as well. And it's going through several revisions, so that is airtight, jam-packed, full of detail, with no filler down the line. Also, Make sure that you're not running the risk of any cliches. If you're talking about why law matters or why justice is important or why you've always admired attorneys or you want to be the next Harvey Specter, you've written the same essay as thousands of other people and the reader already knows where it's going to go. The essay's job is to make one specific person memorable. That means you're painting the picture of a scene or a decision you made, something concrete. You're telling a real story, something that actually happened, that not about your beliefs. They've seen a million of those. What you want is an essay that only you could have written, not one about someone else that anybody could have written. You want your friend to be able to pick your essay out of a stack of others and know that it was you specifically. I know that things are competitive right now, so you want to make every essay as strong as possible, plus all the other components, your rec letters, your resume, and of course your LSAT score. Law school applications are up over 36% over the past 2 years, and so you want to have every component as strong as possible. Of course, if you had a bad semester in college and your grades were low, you can write an addendum, but the best way to offset a lower GPA is with a higher LSAT score. And law schools weigh your LSAT score more heavily than your undergraduate GPA anyway, and they don't average multiple scores. They only take the highest. And so if you need to retake the LSAT, retake it. Better to apply a month or two later with a higher score than earlier with a lower score. And if you want my help studying for the LSAT, getting the highest score possible, I'm happy to help you out. I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. You can book that free LSAT tutoring lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. The link's below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG. I've also put together a free LSAT cheat sheet to help you jumpstart your LSAT prep. It's a free PDF download. You can grab that at unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care. Thanks for joining.